This is Gabriel Custodiet of Watchman Privacy. I know why you're here. You're looking to escape the technocratic apparatuses that you see slowly enveloping you and restraining your freedom. For the fundamentals of privacy, you should start by visiting escapethetechnocracy.com to see my video tutorials, books, and other resources for getting off the surveillance grid. Watchman Privacy and Escape the Technocracy are leading the fight for privacy, and unlike just about any other show, we practice what we preach. Private payment options, no threat modeling, no statist or collectivist solutions, and no sponsors, ever. You know what that means? It means we can speak the unmitigated truth as we see it. Your support alone determines the future of this show. Go support you and me at escapethetechnocracy.com. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Martin from assetprotectionadvisors.com. Has a handy YouTube channel called Shadow Atlas, and he invited me onto his show, and so I wanted to return the favor and find out a little bit more about him. Martin, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thank you very much for the introduction, Gabriel. It's all going well. Enjoying the sun in southern France.
Awesome. Yes, this is one of the things that people will notice about your videos is that you're constantly traveling. You do some good little production value there. I think it's very cool, showing us various scenery from Europe in the background. I wonder if you could just maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself and your company.
Absolutely. Before I begin, just to all the viewers, Gabriel and I will be talking maybe a bit about financial aspects, but none of this is financial or legal advice. You can consult your attorney or your tax advisor, but some of the things you may be implementing in your strategies. So my name is Martin. I graduated from law school about 8 years now already. And what we've created is basically a tax optimization, asset protection, and wealth management service that focuses on geopolitics and strategic thinking. Because in today's day and age, a lot of people see on YouTube a lot of videos that rely on going to a different place, residencies and tax loopholes, which, by the way, are great strategies. But tax loopholes, they come and go. So do residencies. So what we've integrated is both from a legal and an accounting perspective to create a holistic approach where you can actually build something long-term. Sometimes when I go to these networking events, I introduce myself that we make rich people look poor on paper. And that's essentially what we do. You want to own nothing but control everything, because what you do not own can't be taken away from you.
So Martin, based on your holistic approach in your videos, you talk about gold, crypto, traditional banking, and you find a lot of people in these silos talking about one thing or another and completely dismissing other strategies. It seems like you found the field of asset protection maybe a little bit wanting. Maybe there were some things that were not being talked about. Where do you think that you came in? And clearly you found a lot of the financial advice maybe a little bit lacking. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Fantastic question. So first and foremost, our team, obviously I'm the one in front of the camera because I'm the youngest and obviously have a bit of the energy, but we have a bunch of other members to create an actual holistic approach. So both accountants and lawyers. And our founders, they created this business back in 1993 in Latvia. So to give some context, Michael Hudson, he is a professor at, I think, Chicago University, and he has made excellent research about capital flight. And essentially, after the collapse of the USSR, a bunch of the wealth was moved towards Western banking. And that's where our founders started with offshore. So you'll hear a lot in my videos. I talk about offshore banking. I talk about offshore companies. And during that time, Michael Hudson is 100% correct. A lot of people were trying to hide their wealth because, Russia is quite corrupt in that sense. And unknowingly, we started our business over there. The problem with offshores, Gabriel, is that over the decades, especially after 9/11, this simple approach of just saying, hey, I have a private bank account in country X, Y, and Z, and nobody's going to know about it, it doesn't work. Mainly because of the increase in digital surveillance, the common reporting standards. Basically, all countries, they share information with one another. And so therefore you have to have a bit of a holistic approach, because I got to be honest, it's not that simple anymore, right? Even if you're talking about gold or silver, some people are just into Monero and cryptocurrencies. We view them as tools that solve a specific problem. So one of the first videos that kind of irked, I think, a bunch of the audience was about gold. And I believe that gold is an excellent hedge against inflation. I believe that gold can definitely be used for anonymity in small doses. But through our experience, I mean, I've bought gold in Mexico. I've bought it in Netherlands, in France, Germany, Estonia, Latvia. I have some experience with it, right? And with after a certain amount, it actually doesn't become that anonymous, because you have to provide KYC if you want to buy it over certain amounts. And for selling it, I think almost all European countries require some form of documentation. Same thing goes with cryptos. For certain use cases, it's great. For example, moving money across borders, that's the design of blockchain. But to say that it is the end-all, be-all silver bullet, that's a step a bit too far. And therefore, everything, there's this beautiful quote from Hamlet, and I was forced to read it, Gabriel, when I was in high school, but he says something along the lines of, nothing is good or evil, but thinking makes it so. And that's how life is in general. You have tools, but it isn't a one-all, be-all solution.
Yeah, it's a very reasonable approach. And I thought I'd just ask a few questions from some of the topics you cover, just to give people a sense of your knowledge, your expertise, and how you think about things. Maybe we could start with gold and silver first. So as you said, you're a realist about things. You're testing these things out, and that's valuable as well. You mentioned that when you go to buy gold in person or sell gold in person, it's not so straightforward. It obviously depends on the country. Maybe just some of your experience about it's not just a matter of you go into a place, you give them cash, end of story. Maybe just talk a little bit of your experience in physical transactions, buying and selling gold around the world.
So at heart, Gabriel, I'm a numismatist. I enjoy coins. I have a lot of experience also in that field. And that's also one of the reasons why I have been quite valuable to our team when it comes to buying and selling gold. And yes, you're absolutely right that there are certain countries, like in the United States, I think below $10,000 as a threshold, you don't have to report or give your ID. The problem is that this highway is narrowing. And if you're looking at certain jurisdictions, by all means, there are still places where you can buy it anonymously, especially if you know the dealer. But as a long-term approach, I said it in one of my videos, if you're thinking of being a nomad or you have to travel a lot, it's very, very difficult to move large quantities of precious metals. It just straightforward is because, number one, of capital controls. That was one of the recent videos I made. Each country has specific thresholds after which you have to report it. Guess what? Once you report it to customs or the country that you're traveling to, it's no longer anonymous. Secondly, when it comes to buying and selling, obviously in the European Union, it's far more strict than in the United States, but in France, it's ridiculous. You cannot buy any gold and silver above 1,000 euros in cash. Now, this only applies to French citizens. Foreigners don't have this requirement, as I've understood it. But still, the trajectory is towards compliance. So as a hedge against inflation, by all means, I personally also agree with that. But when it comes to wealth management, there is probably far more benefit from using something that is more liquid, because keep this in mind, you do not want to be a forced seller of precious metals. Because number one, when you're going to go to a bullion dealer, you're not going to get the spot price, right? They'll always take a small haircut. It's called a premium. And when you buy these coins, you also have to pay that small little premium. So it's designed to be a long-term hold. And a lot of the people that we work with, they're perpetual travelers, right? They don't want to live in one place for the rest of their lives. If you are, get yourself a safe at home. Make sure that obviously you put in some privacy features. That's a great way to do it. So to answer your question and to wrap around it, it really depends on the situation, but I would gear more towards gold and silver being an excellent hedge to keep your wealth rather than it being a privacy tool.
It's certainly the case that depending where you are, you may or may not be able to easily acquire physical gold and silver in cash. And you also pointed out something in one of your videos. You were actually showing a video of George Gammon where he had trouble getting even a reasonable price for selling his precious metals. Maybe that was in Argentina. They were much more interested in US dollars. And so that just tells you that if you go around with some kind of extremist attitude, oh, I have to be in precious metals in a disaster scenario, it's going to be, people are going to be using silver or whatever. It's not quite the best way to think about things. You do want to be flexible, and I think that's the value of your approach. I also found it revelatory. You pointed towards Arnold Schwarzenegger recently got in trouble crossing borders at the Munich airport because he had a watch that was in an expensive watch that he was bringing for an auction, and he didn't report it, so he got detained. If he was wearing that watch, maybe that wouldn't have happened. What are your thoughts on transporting, going from place to place, jewelry, watches, things of this sort? What are some of the other ways that people can go from country to country and maybe have some wealth that they're transporting in a perfectly reasonable way that goes a little bit under the radar?
When it comes to Arnold Schwarzenegger, again, just an absolutely ridiculous scenario. To give some context, a year ago, he was selling his watch at an Austrian auction, and he had to go through the Munich airport. He was detained for 3 hours because, as Gabriel mentioned, it was in a box in his suitcase, and he had another watch on his wrist that had no problems. And the police basically gave him a 35,000 euro fine, even though he was going to sell it. So that was quite an expensive experience for him. When it comes to moving wealth, right now airports are becoming more and more difficult. And I think that with digital ID coming into play soon, it's not going to be anonymous, even if you are wearing your watches and all, because, hey, there are cameras everywhere. And the moment that you scan your passport in Europe, we have these ID metrics where it's basically a biosecurity airport. And if you're wearing some kind of watches, they may come after you later down the line. But for now, it is true that with jewelry, especially in the United States, there are certain interesting rules that do not apply to them. So in the United States, I cannot mention other places because I haven't researched everything, but jewelry and gold jewelry specifically is not considered a financial asset. So I used the example of Elizabeth Taylor. She was a famous actress, would travel around the world with her jewelry. It is getting more complicated, though, because what used to happen is in Dubai, you would have a bunch of these Indians who would go there and they would strap themselves with all kinds of gold jewelry and then tell the border officials that, oh, I'm coming back to India for an Indian wedding. And in their culture, gold is very prevalent in these weddings. Well, they cracked down on that. So it's not as easy to now get out of Dubai with a bunch of gold. So it is an option, but to be fair, especially in the European Union, the best way to travel around is with trains, is with buses, cars, right? Their border security, they don't really look at it. They usually use, and this is something I would like to mention to the audience, they will use these very famous people like Arnold Schwarzenegger to make it appear as if there is a massive crackdown because it garners a lot of media attention. But in reality, it is just to use him as an example. Right now, to this day, a lot of rich Chinese and Middle Eastern businessmen, they still move around their wealth with watches. As long as you're wearing it, as long as it looks like an accessory, there is no problem with it.
Let's move in then into crypto. This is something you discuss, something that you don't hear too many people in asset management really discuss, certainly at the level of understanding that you do. Now, I'm sure it seems like you've been exposed to these people as well, the people who are just hardcore, maybe they've gotten rid of their bank accounts and they think that there's going to be this world where they're only using Monero or something, and they can get away with that and cash in and cash out as they need to. What did you see, though, in the real world, the problems with that kind of mindset, and therefore the need to be flexible and have some alternative options, especially for wealthier people who are trying to use this for practical things?
I wish our landlords would accept crypto. I'm not against crypto in itself. The problem is that a lot of people, they have this dogmatic approach and they don't realize that we mostly deal with business owners, and business owners, they need to pay for suppliers, they need to pay employees, they need to, for example, pay rent. And these services don't accept crypto. They want fiat. And the most important thing with cryptocurrencies is the on-ramping and off-ramping solution. And a lot of people who say, oh, Monero is the solution to all of your problems. And they get angry at me when I say, hey, we need to find over-the-counter dealers for Monero. They say, why would you ever want to convert it into fiat? Well, because we're still living in a dollarized world, whether you like it or not. And you need to use bank accounts in order to buy and sell services. So when it comes to cryptocurrencies, I think the most important aspect is finding the perfect on-ramping and off-ramping solution. To the audience that isn't too familiar with it, basically, when you are in the cryptoverse, you can privately transact with these privacy coins. You can even obfuscate and use all kinds of chain hopping or atomic swap techniques. I've made videos on that. The difficulty, though, is that all of that is on the blockchain. And so what you want to build is that bridge that connects your blockchain activities to your banking activities, because at the end of the day, you obviously want to use that money. And that's a solution that I actually encountered a lot in Latin America, especially in Mexico and Colombia. I spent quite a bit of time, a year there. And over there, there were lots of Russians because it was right after the beginning of the Ukraine war, and they were coming to Mexico as well as Colombia, fleeing the draft. And they did use cryptos, guys, absolutely. But they were converting them later on into dollars so that they could actually buy goods and services there. And it's very prevalent to have these over-the-counter dealers, which are essentially like brokers, and they will take your crypto and then convert it into fiat. So in my videos, I accentuate that you would like to build relationships with these people because they will be extremely important down the line, including with Monero.
Yeah, I want to ask you about the OTC stuff in a moment, but before that, I'm curious. I suspect that you know a good bit about this. There are some places where using crypto is straight out illegal. I think Dubai is one such place. Are you aware of some, let's say, really unfriendly, maybe over the top kind of crackdowns on actually using crypto, particular countries?
Dubai isn't, it's not illegal to use crypto in Dubai. It's that banks do not accept crypto in Dubai. So a lot of people think that because Dubai has 0% capital gains tax, which is very crypto friendly, by the way, they think that, oh, I'll just move over there with my 50 million whatever in crypto. It's not going to be taxed and I'll just plow it into a bank account. It doesn't work that way. In fact, a lot of people, what they do is they go to Dubai, they buy property, they buy all kinds of luxury goods, etc., with their cryptos, and then later on they're able to sell it and move the money into their bank accounts.
I'm just referencing here. This is from Coindesk.com. In Dubai, the issuance of and all activities related to anonymity-enhancing cryptocurrencies such as Monero are prohibited under new laws published Tuesday.
True. So this was talking about USDT, but as Gabriel mentioned about privacy coins like Monero, that's not just Dubai, by the way. That's South Korea. That's, if I'm not mistaken, Japan. And by the way, France is also cracking down. So let's make a distinction between cryptos like USDT and Bitcoin, as well as privacy coins. When it comes to privacy coins, I believe that they will become so restricted that it will only be an option for very wealthy individuals who would like to actually transact privately. It will not be something for the regular person. And the reason why is because so far in our experience, we have yet to encounter an over-the-counter dealer who can convert the privacy coins into cash. And the more restrictions that are put onto these coins, the less likely that people will actually want to accept them. And that is the conundrum that we are seeing, in Dubai, as you said, as well as South Korea. France, they basically have banned it on exchanges, so you can no longer buy privacy coins like Monero on Kraken. Binance delisted Monero entirely a year ago. There are P2P exchanges like Local Monero that was shut down last year, May. So the options are narrowing, and it's becoming less and less practical.
Quick diversion here, but still on the topic of crypto. Roger Ver, as people know, was extradited, arrested for I forget exactly what the allegation is. Let me put it this way, since I think you may have looked into this a little bit. What do you think Roger Ver should have done differently? Let me phrase it like that. If he could go back, what do you think Roger Ver should have done differently?
Roger Ver is an extremely interesting case because he didn't do anything wrong, and I'll explain to you why. Back in 2014, he renounced his US citizenship and he got a St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship. And what the US government, or the IRS specifically, is arguing is that he did not declare his cryptos when he renounced his US citizenship. And if you have done the process, you know very well that you have to pay a tax when you leave the country. The problem is that back in 2014, number one, crypto was not taxed. It wasn't deemed as a taxable asset. It was very murky. And number two, if he would have sold his crypto shares at the time, right now I think the IRS wants 50 million or something from him, it would have crashed the entire Bitcoin market because he owned a very big chunk of it. So it has nothing to do, in my opinion, about the taxes. I believe it has everything to do with the most recent book that he came out with, which is called Hijacking Bitcoin. I've read it, fantastic read. And Roger Ver, he names a lot of names. He is quite anti-government in it. He basically says that Bitcoin has been institutionalized and that it has been overtaken by actors such as Adam Beck, if I'm not mistaken. I actually met Adam Beck at Bitcoin Prague. He is definitely a spook. I agree with Roger. But I think what Roger has to understand is when you have such a high notoriety and when you speak out on issues, you have to also downplay how much wealth you own. And everybody knows him as Bitcoin Jesus. He comes on podcasts and he says that I was the first investor. I'm the OG in the crypto space. And it doesn't take a mathematician to understand that he can be hurt with his wealth. The same thing is with John McAfee, unfortunately. Rest in peace.
So you mentioned the OTC dealers. Going back to that, this is probably a big draw for you. You talk about this on YouTube. Just break that down a little bit. So people have maybe large amounts of cryptocurrencies. They can't really use that. They can't really cash out in the real world. Just break down a little bit. How does this OTC work exactly?
So just to be clear, we personally do not do OTC. We have partners who do OTC. But let me break down what it is. So you can have two ways of swapping your crypto for cash. One, and the easiest way that everybody knows, is you go to Binance, Kraken, whichever, Coinbase, and you just swap it into your bank account and it gets sent into your wire. The problem with these exchanges is KYC. They have your whole biometrics and everything is linked to you. Obviously, later down the line, you have to pay taxes. By the way, we believe that everyone should pay their taxes, and make sure that you discuss with your accountants and lawyers. But what over-the-counter dealers do is that they bypass these exchanges and they work with a broker. So just like you would have a real estate broker, a broker is somebody who connects you with the buyer. So what they are essentially a middleman. You have Bitcoin. They find somebody who wants to buy Bitcoin in exchange for whatever currency you want. So it can be dollars if you want dollars in your bank account. It can also be cash dollars if somebody wants to buy Bitcoin with cash. It can even be a car. Somebody may want to exchange their car for Bitcoin. So it can be a wide variety of assets. It doesn't have to specifically be cash, but most people, they use an over-the-counter dealer to convert their cryptos into a bank wire.
I thought, Martin, that we could now move to another thing that you discuss regularly, which is just the traditional world of bank accounts, corporate entities, trusts, and things of the sort. Maybe you could just touch on a couple topics. Obviously, very complex subject, but you do have an ability to break certain things down and at least help people to appreciate why they might want to learn more about these things. How about this, though, as an initial question? The reporting that goes on in bank accounts, right? The days of private bank accounts and all the rest are over. What is the CRS and what are the types of reporting that bank accounts have to do regardless where you are in the world?
I think that there's a lot of information that is outdated today, because in our free calls, we also get a lot of people who ask about, can I get a cheap structure, an offshore structure? Let me break it down to your audience. So companies, the reason why you would want to have a company is because they play by different rules. If you are a salaried person or self-employed, what the government does is they rob you first, and only then you get to pay all of your bills and expenses, etc. With a company, it's different. First, you have to pay all of your expenses, salaries, you want to pay for the supplies, the products, etc. And only then do they tax you, and usually at a much lower rate. And that's why a lot of businesses, they obviously structure through companies. And then the wealthy, they even go a step further and create these complex structures with trusts, foundations, etc., not only to reduce your taxes, that's A. B, it limits your liability, okay? I can go into that if you would like. And C, the assets are not directly owned by you, they're owned by a different entity, and thus it also brings some anonymity. The problem today, however, is that a lot of people think you can go to Panama, right? And you set up a company with a bank account, you plow in all of your money, and boom, your government doesn't know about it anymore. Well, maybe that was the case 20, 25 years ago, but today everything is so interconnected by an organization known as the OECD, and they use the Common Reporting Standards, which is basically banks exchanging information between themselves. So let's use the example of Panama. If you go over there, you create a company and open an account, all of that bank information is going to be automatically reported to your home country. Now, if you are a smart individual, you would say, well, then I'll just go to countries that don't have common reporting standards. And there are a few, definitely in Africa, in Asia, Kazakhstan, right? That's one of them. The problem with doing that is even these countries report information. Maybe not automatically, but they have what they call EOIR, exchange of information upon request. What that means is if your government, say the United Kingdom, goes and knocks on Kazakhstan's door and says, we want information on John Smith, they will comply, and vice versa. There are also MAAC, Mutual Assistance and Administrative Conventions. So almost all countries are going to share information. So the strategy today is to make as many layers as possible to make it more expensive for them to find that information. But at the end of the day, if somebody tells you that there is complete private banking, even though it makes for a good YouTube title, it's not so much the case.
You discuss Northern Cyprus.
Northern Cyprus, Taiwan, basically, there are certain places around the world that are not recognized countries. And it plays on the legal principle that if they are not recognized, then your country cannot ask it for information. So in the case of Northern Cyprus, 99.5% of the world does not recognize that the country exists. The only one that does is Turkey. And so therefore, they don't have to share that information. They only share it with Turkey. Now, I want to give a caveat that if you are some real person that they want to find out information on, like let's say Roger Ver, if he used Northern Cyprus, most likely the US could go and say, Turkey, go tell your colony to give up all of the information. And they would most likely comply. But for the average individual, it may be an interesting option in specific cases because A, it has banks. You can actually use them to open bank accounts even in Turkey. B, the tax regime is quite favorable if you structure it properly. And C, it is the only place where you could basically consider it as an anonymous jurisdiction. Now, again, Gabriel, it is for certain individuals because what I don't like about Northern Cyprus is that for a non-recognized jurisdiction, the government knows very well that it's an interesting legal aspect, and so they jack up the prices. So you might say, what? Why is it so expensive to go and build something over there? Because they know very well that other countries can't ask for that information.
What has been your experience going around the world, opening up bank accounts, working with particular countries or regions? Do you have any kind of big picture takeaways?
So in our asset protection residency space, there are a lot of narratives about leaving the West and getting out of the United States, the European Union, etc. And while I agree that these countries are definitely experiencing an economic downfall, their financial institutions are one of the best in the world. Not because they're any, more sophisticated than Eastern banks, but because they're very reputable and a lot of countries like to work with them. And so I hesitate to say that, just go to Latin America or Asia where there's far more freedoms, and there are. But when it comes to banking, we advocate you to create a structure where you can actually use reputable, I would call them first tier, only because they're first tier in the ease of banking, like the United States, the UK, Barclays, HSBC, Bank of America. And to do that, you must create a structure that is deemed as acceptable in the bank's eyes. So if you think that you're going to go, let's say Cambodia, right? Non-CRS, they have pretty decent banking, by the way, for a country that is maybe on the developing side. And you think that you're going to set up a company over there, and then you're going to go to Bank of America, and they will open accounts for your business. They'll say, get out of here, right? And therefore, it may make more sense to set up a structure in Hong Kong or Singapore or even the United Kingdom, even though these are jurisdictions that ask for more information, even though they might have more compliance, and of course they're costlier, but you get that access to the banking. So our approach is to create a bridge between the Western financial services, because those are the ones that work, and making sure that you can actually continue running your business, continue doing your lifestyle in the East, where the laws are favorable, where the culture is actually one that you vibe with, but you keep that banking door open.
Another big picture question here. I'll let you go whichever direction you want. It seems like one of the great protections people have these days and privacy tools is trusts. Could you explain trusts and how people should think about them?
They should think about them as a savings account, not a personal piggy bank. And a lot of people that we've spoken to, they have the correct mindset that it's one of the best tools to sever the chain between you and your assets, which is true. For the layman, what a trust is, it's an agreement between you and a third party, where the third party, the trustee, is going to manage all of your assets for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And those could be your kids, your wife. And it was actually invented by the knights in England when they would go to battle and they didn't know if they would return home. So they would give a third party the keys to their wealth so that in case they get killed, their wife and children are taken care of. The thing that you need to take into consideration is that in order for a trust to be deemed as valid in the eyes of the court, there has to be separation between you and your assets. So a lot of people think that I'm just going to put all of my wealth and my millions into a trust, and I'll continue using all the bank accounts, I'll continue living in the house, and I'll continue trading cryptos in a trust account. You can, by the way, do all that, but you will not have access to it. It will be a trustee who will have access to it. Then there are obviously ways to make it that you have more control over the assets, but that's why the rich have a huge team of accountants, of CFOs, of lawyers, and you have to create a presentation to the government. Case in point, if you, for example, buy a house in California, let's take that, and you want to install a pool in it, right? If you install a pool in it in your personal name, that $100,000 that it takes to build a pool is just going to be an expense, right? You can't get any tax deductions from it. Interestingly enough, if you put it into a trust, then all of a sudden that pool, that renovation, is seen as an asset improvement for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And then, therefore, you can take that $100,000 and use it as a deductible. And that's what essentially the rich do. However, presentation matters. And that's why recommending these kind of structures for tax reduction to individuals who maybe have a little bit of wealth but don't have recurring business is a bit premature. And I think that the trust should be used for its true purpose, which is it helps evade probate. It gives a succession line for all of your assets to your children, to your wife. And it's a great asset protection mechanism, right? You want to make sure that you avoid fraudulent conveyance. You want to make sure that your trusts are prepared in advance, that you don't throw everything into it when the waters become turbulent. So that's why it's always advisable to create these asset protection structures years in advance and to slowly basically put in money that you don't actually need, so that you don't have the courts say, oh, we're going to reverse the transfer. A lot of people, they set up a trust right before the divorce, and they think that, oh, well, then the assets are no longer in my name, so it's great. My wife can't get anything. That's not how it works, right?
Yes, all good points. There's not a single person listening who shouldn't be learning more about trusts and what they can do for you. I thought, Martin, we could kind of conclude with a few questions on your experiences traveling the world a little bit. It seems like you've seen a few things, and I want to ask your opinion or your observations of particular regions. And when I'm asking, sure, your general observations, absolutely. Also, obviously, as regards things like crypto friendliness, gold friendliness, cash-based societies, and all the stuff that you talk about. So just get your thoughts on a few different regions. Seems like you've spent some time in Latin America. What is your assessment of this region?
I enjoy Latin America because I enjoy chaos. I thrive in areas where you don't have too much rules and regulations, but it's not for everybody. And therefore, I understand the beauty and what people enjoy for in Europe, in the United States, the fact that the bus comes on time. But there's always a consequence, right? Some of the most timely countries, like Germany or even the Netherlands, were also one of the harshest when it came to the scandal 5 years ago. I won't mention it for YouTube purposes, but I think everybody knows what I mean. In Latin America, even though there were laws on paper, it's very difficult to enforce them. And therefore, for anybody who's thinking about escaping the digital gulag, you might want to consider countries which, for geopolitical reasons, because it's very difficult to control the mountains of the Andes, for example, or the rainforest, the Amazon rainforest. How do you control these areas? And therefore, the people there are far more liberal. They see rules as recommendations, not actually as official doctrine. Meanwhile, it is very, very difficult for you to start any business there. And Doug Casey, which, by the way, I've learned so much from him. I've watched a lot of his interviews. He, in one of them, says that if he were young, he would love to have gone to Africa. And he recommends young people to go and explore Africa for business opportunities. And I think maybe what he meant by it is you want to spend time in these regions and develop contacts. But you will most likely never actually, A, integrate into their cultures, and B, sell to the local people, because their entire community is based on trust. And these places, sometimes they don't even trust their own people, right? There are a lot of scams, of course, that happen in, let's take Turkey or Colombia or Mexico. And what you want to do is you want to develop these, what I call plugs. And they're the people who will introduce you to the business opportunities so that you're the one who has the keys to export products from Latin America back home. Or you have access to certain arrangements for minerals or resources that others who would immediately come to the country would not have. But I would really refrain from saying that, oh, I'll go to, let's say, Southeast Asia and I'll start doing business with them there. That's not how it works there. They have this onion layer mindset where you start off from the outer layer of the onion, and then supposedly you're supposed to work inwards. The problem is, Gabriel, you will never be in the inner core of the onion there. Never as a foreigner. It just doesn't work that way.
We hear the narrative of cashless society. Certainly that is true for some areas. Have you, and one thing I've noticed from your presentations is that you seem somewhat, all things considered, maybe bullish on the US dollar, especially as you see so many other countries. Like you go to a country, maybe the perception is, oh, these people must be using crypto, they must be using gold. Well, no, actually, they're using US dollars. They want US dollars. What is your observation of countries around the world that are very amenable to cash, and maybe even where US dollars is a prized commodity?
Absolutely. A lot of countries see wealth or wealth management, and they see a way how to keep more of their wealth in US dollars, in also sometimes in Turkey, for example, British pounds and euros. A lot of people in the crypto space do not maybe value that. Let me put it in a different way. In Argentina and in Venezuela, for example, I think the people understand about inflation far more than any of us do. And for them, a US dollar actually would improve their life, because George Gammon made a fantastic presentation on how if you calculate the rate of inflation to also the rate of the price increases compared to their own currency, the US dollar actually would increase their wealth as long as your wealth is coming in dollars. So he used the example not just of Argentina, but of Brazil and Japan, where if you're keeping your wealth in USD, you would actually have improved your lifestyle considerably over the past decade. Now, maybe where I disagree with George Gammon is that this may be a short time span, and I would agree maybe more with Francis Hunt, another person who's very intriguing and interesting to look into. He thinks that there is going to be a debt collapse, and that is definitely most likely going to be the case, but in the long term. So right now, in these developing countries, they understand what a dollar is. They do not understand really how to use gold and silver. It was a point that David Graeber, in his book 5,000 Years of Debt History, pointed out that not once when there was a currency collapse did people revert to sound money. Even in the Middle Ages, hundreds of years after the Roman currency collapsed, everyone was accounting in their communities in the Roman denarius. And it was crazy for me to realize that. And I think that's a fantastic read for anybody who wants to dive into the topic. But for now, the US dollar is the global currency. And I 100% agree with all of the people who say that it may not be the case. Same thing happened with sterling. It ended up dying out as a world reserve currency. But guess what? It took 25 years for it to collapse. And if you think that the dollar is going to collapse tomorrow, well, history has shown otherwise.
I wholeheartedly agree. If I were to have the option right now of an amount of gold or Monero or cash, US dollars, I'll take US dollars every day of the week, especially because it's the most useful.
Just a point. Absolutely. Again, I might be annoying some people with my caveats because with cash, and I support people having some cash on them, the problem with wealth management is that it's a very dangerous way of keeping your wealth, because I personally got robbed in Latin America with cash. So if you think that gold is difficult to move around, well, cash is a risk as well. So it's always a balance. That's what we're trying to do in the wealth management and asset protection space.
Sometimes when people have their bunker, right, it would make sense for them to, and they're not traveling, they're not international. Sure, it would make sense for them to have physical gold. But if you are traveling around, if you don't have a fixed abode, then that certainly changes things, because you can't just take your physical gold anywhere easily, certainly, and you wouldn't want to, and you wouldn't want it to cross borders for the most part. So there are many things to consider. All right, Martin, as we wind down here, maybe just your final thoughts. Talk about what your service, what you can offer with your company, and any other things maybe we didn't touch on.
Right. Basically, what we are integrators and aggregators. We take everything. We don't promote a single tool. Like, for example, you'll see videos about Northern Cyprus and the Free Zone Company, and it's for a specific audience. It's not for everybody. I just mentioned that it's a bit expensive for people. We talk about trusts. Again, for a specific type of person, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Then for some people, having Monero and keeping a bit of gold and silver coins and just slowly stacking your wealth that way is also a fantastic option. And sometimes I have to catch myself, Gabriel, because we speak maybe a bit to a business audience, but definitely there are certain people who would benefit from moving to a lower tax jurisdiction like Dubai or Panama, and just moving their life, experiencing a different culture. 100% agree with that. So you can go to assetprotectionadvisors.com and you can check. We have a bit more of material over there, or Shadow Atlas. That's my YouTube channel. We provide content over there. If you like the holistic approach that we go with, you can book a call and we can see how we can help you best. And yeah, that's pretty much it. One thing I want to mention just before I leave, I really think that business owners who are very good at building teams should also expand their horizons on the next 10, 15 years of more technocracy. And therefore, Gabriel, what I really love about him is that he is the integral part when it comes to actually building a more privacy focused business model. Even when I was speaking about the bridge of using cryptocurrencies, if you don't know how to obfuscate and actually use them privately, say you have your IP switched on when you're doing chain hopping or atomic swaps, it can destroy the entire structure that you have built. And therefore, you would like to consult with experts, including Watchman Privacy, including Gabriel. I think it is imperative for the next 10, 15 years. So that's why I keep promoting you, Gabriel, because I really think that it is something people need to know about.
This has been Martin of assetprotectionadvisors.com. He gave his links. We'll have his links. You can watch some of his videos. Reach out to him if you'd like. It seems like he has an opportunity for an initial free call, so you can go and vet him and get a better understanding of what he offers. If you've liked what you've heard, certainly go check out his YouTube video. He has some really interesting and holistic takes, which I find very valuable. So thank you again, Martin. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too, Gabriel.
Hey, thanks for listening. Look, I could use your help real quick. If you could share this, engage with me in some way, leave a review anywhere. This really helps me to break the technocratic shadow banning that is happening with my brand. And of course, if you really want to escape the technocracy, go to escapethetechnocracy.com. Privacy tutorial series, books, consulting, and of course, you can leave a donation. Thank you very much.